Well, welcome back to our It's About Time Innovation series, where we're asking how higher education can be faster, more affordable, and perhaps, most provocatively, easier. In this segment, we turn to the theme of reducing administrative burden. Students often tell us that one of the hardest parts of college isn't the learning, but the bureaucracy. Navigating financial aid, advising, course registration, and institutional processes, it can feel absolutely overwhelming. If we want to make higher education truly easier, we must rethink how we organize ourselves to serve our students. Well, I'm joined today by Dr. Jennifer Cowley, the president of the University of Texas at Arlington. And Dr. Cowley is the first woman to serve as the president of UTA, a leading research university in one of the fastest growing regions of the country. She's a nationally recognized scholar and a higher education leader with deep experience in academic affairs, strategic planning, and community partnerships. Today, she brings that perspective to our conversation about how higher education can reduce unnecessary barriers and make the path to success easier for our students. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you so much. Look forward to our conversation today.
Oh, great. So let's just start. Why do we try to make it hard? The perception of many about higher education is that we try to make both the academic side and the administrative side as difficult as we possibly can. Now, we know that's not fair, but why do we have that perception, and what are we going to do to change that perception in the outside?
I think some of it is the reduction in friction that we've seen with the outside world and the ways that we interact with it. If I want to order something on Amazon, I can have it delivered same day. So it's really hard for our students to understand if I can somehow get anything I want in the world delivered within a day or two, how is it that can it take 72 hours to reset my password or whatever the thing might be that we're hitting in those administrative burdens. And so I think that's something that's an opportunity for all of us to ask questions. Are we unintentionally putting barriers in the way? Do we just have outdated systems and processes? And what can we do to reduce that friction for our students in every step of their student journey?
And how do we do that internally? Through a set of conversations? There's obviously external factors that come to bear on this, regulatory things that we need to do in terms of financial aid and processes that control us. But I get the sense that maybe sometimes we're complacent in our approach to trying to make things as effective and as easy as possible. I hope it's not purposeful, and I don't believe it's purposeful in most institutions, but it certainly is perceived as prevalent.
Well, one of the things that I've done is in one of our student strategic planning retreats, we focused on barriers. And I just invited each individual to reflect on what's a barrier they have observed a student go through. What's some process in their own office that they feel like creates a barrier to students? How do we get that all down on paper? And then how do we start to reflect on what do we need to do to change? So I'll just give you an example. We have holds. We all have holds that we put on accounts to prevent students from registering. And some of them are regulatory that we have to. But the vast majority of them, it was just like, we need a student to do something, so we'll just make registration the motivating thing that will cause a student to have to reflect and figure that out. We said, that's silly. Why are we doing it that way? And one of the things that we observed is we had a code that said departmental hold. Well, a student doesn't know what is the department. The problem is there was no information, so even somebody, an advisor, they didn't know what the department was that had put in place the hold, and it turned out there were hundreds of people on campus that could have used the hold button, departmental hold. Well, then you've got students running all over campus trying to figure out what is this hold that I have in place and how do we get rid of it? And so we just looked at every single hold we had and said, let's get this down to the absolute bare minimum we can, and let's not view registration as the mechanism by which we're going to get students to take actions that we need. We can find other ways to engage with our students and have them connect with us on an issue that they may need to resolve. And so that one step has meant that our students can register sooner, faster, and that we're not creating a silly barrier along their way.
That's a wonderful example. I wish I didn't have the same types of examples internally at UMass Global, but we do. I was approached by a student just last month who had a hold for $5 that they owed us, and they were trying to give us a full tuition for the coming year, but we wouldn't take it because they owed us $5 from a different account. And
Well,
it's
and
it
we had the exact same problem, David, that we had. If you owed us 1 penny, then you could not register. And we're like, that
exactly.
is so silly. And it's just one of those antiquated things. Nobody had reflected back and looked at how are we preventing student success over 1 cent. And so it's been really great for us to go through a process and identify some of those and pull those out.
Well, I'm glad to hear that we share that it's not purposeful. It's legacy systems. Sometimes it's one system not being able to correct the behavior of another system, and sometimes it's just things that we haven't revisited in a while. So, and I do think that most of us are trying to make that side easier and still be in compliance with the regulatory side of the things that we need to do. But it's confusing to students, that's for sure. We have financial aid support advisors that are called One Stop, and I tease our group. It's the fourth person you talk to, so it's really not one stop. Once you get there, it's one stop, but you have to go through three other people to get to that one stop. So I think just having some common sense and looking through these processes, and like you say, the rest of the world is super into efficiency, and we've got students coming in who are used to on-demand support, and on-demand services, and we typically haven't worked that way. So let's switch gears a bit and talk about something that's even more difficult, not easy even for us to talk about, which is why do we insist upon making learning harder? Why is that our role? Is our role to screen, or is our role to facilitate learning? As we give these credentials, we want them to have value, and we want the outcome to be a meaningful outcome with return on investment. But why do we incorporate into that this notion that rigor means it has to be very difficult, and if you run the gauntlet, we might be willing to give you the kind of credential that you're looking for?
Well, we've tried to shift our thinking and say that if we are admitting students, we have determined that they are capable of achieving the coursework that we're putting in front of them. If we're going to choose to make that admissions decision, then what supports are we providing to make sure a student is successful along the way? I can remember my freshman year, that first semester, they said, look to your left, look to your right, two of you won't be here. And guess what? They were right. But I was so discouraged in that first 6 weeks of school, I changed my major. And I just think, man, that's not the world we live in today. We want to make sure that we're helping our students achieve their dreams. And what role can we play in making that easier for students to be on that rigorous path, to be challenged in the classroom in the right way so that they're learning and growing, but that we're not making it harder for them to learn and grow.
That's a great point. And both of us spent some time at Ohio State, and that used to be their mantra: look left, look right, somebody's not going to be here. And they said, at the time it was open admissions back in the 50s and 60s, and they said they really had selective admissions. It was called your freshman year. And we want to avoid that. And I love the perspective that if we take them, it's our responsibility to make sure they get to the finish line. It's not who gets into college, it's who gets out. And
Absolutely.
if we've made that commitment, then we find lots of ways of helping students and personalizing the experience so that we can get them to move forward. Are you having any success with technologies that are designed to help coordinate that experience and create personal approaches that are more on demand? I'm approached regularly with this promise of personalization. We've gotten we've made some progress in that regard, but we're certainly not personalizing to the level of some outside of higher education. Any ideas or thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I would say there's a range of different ways that we can see technology helping support decision making. We work in complex systems, and I'll just use class scheduling as one of those examples. That your typical class schedule is created at a departmental level based on the availability of the faculty resources and the internal view of this is my major, these are the courses in my major that are in my department, and how do I schedule those so that they make sense? But it's blind to what else does the student need and the scheduling of when those students need it. We're just trying to use common sense combined with technology to say, how can we take a student success mindset and make sure that we're deploying our class resources in a way that makes the most sense for our students to have what they need when they need it. On the AI front, we are doing some experiments on the AI front. We're doing some of that in advising and some other functions that are important to help support student success, but we're still in early days on that, and we look forward to getting even better and learning from peers about best practices.
Well, I think that's great. And once you commit yourself to things as important and straightforward as scheduling, I'm assuming that you get faculty support once you've pointed it out. I find that most of our faculty are, even though they get beat up on faculty-centric approaches, are very student-centric once you point out the need to put students first in things as fundamental as scheduling. And I think it's important that you're driving that message from the top.
Absolutely. And our faculty are so supportive of our students. They want to see them succeed. Sometimes it just takes some conversation to say, how do we partner better together to achieve the outcomes that we both share?
That's great. What regulatory things outside the institution, what do you find are some of the most significant barriers to making some changes that would be student-centric and make the experience more fluid and easier to navigate? We often hear about financial aid and the FAFSA and the challenges of getting people to understand. I get involved now and again in individual cases, and it's hard for me to follow the process sometimes. And I've been in higher education my entire career. What can we do to think about that, making it accessible from a financial perspective, support perspective, from a regulatory side?
Well, so I'll say kind of two pieces to the puzzle, not changing the regulatory framework to begin with, but better adapting to it. One observation we have is that some of our first generation students just don't understand when they need to start the financial aid process. And so we'll have students who are ready, they're academically capable, showing up the week before classes start and saying, I need a way to figure out how to pay for this. And so we have been partnering with our local school districts to say, what can we do to partner together to make sure that students are completing the FAFSA while they're still in high school, so that we can start that process in a timely manner and make sure they're set up for success well before they ever get to my campus or have even made a decision about which school they're going to go to. Um, I'll say that on the financial aid side, our students also don't understand the rules that apply after they've started classes. So those are some things we can do within the regulatory framework that we have today. But I think there's a lot of work and opportunity for us, both at the state, federal level, to work together to simplify some things. I think it's with everything that rules were created at a time that they made sense to solve a particular problem, but is it relevant today?
Those are wonderful, wonderful observations. I think there's a long list of things that we can do to be more efficient and to help ease the process for students. And we've identified some of those things today. It's great to have you on and as a colleague working to do these things, both on the administrative side and the learning side, to make that process both faster, cheaper, and easier for our students to navigate. I think the most profound thing is that if we take them, we need to get them over the finish line. And that's the commitment that we make collectively to our students in getting them to their desired outcome, which is a credential that has meaning. And I think we're all committed to that.
We are. And, one of the things that I loved in the FAFSA change that recently went through last year is it made it easier to identify a student who is experiencing homelessness. So we would have people that would come for emergency housing, but then they're at a crisis point. And so now we know we have students who are incoming that have faced homelessness. And so we have a coordinator, it's called our Emerging Mavericks program, that is centered on helping support those students, because we know even the smallest financial barrier can just be life-changing in terms of their ability to persist. And so we've dramatically increased our retention of students who've experienced homelessness, and are now well above national averages, as just a result of that one change in the FAFSA and our ability to act on that information to better support student success.
Yeah, and I think it's the acting on that information, being as proactive as we possibly can. And we know from decades of prevention and intervention research that, the earlier you can intervene with the targeted types of interventions and supports, the more successful we're going to be. And it's true in, any area of early intervention. And we should really pay attention to that work. It sounds like you are. And congratulations on taking that step to help, especially that population of kids that are homeless. And we don't think about that often as we go through our day-to-day work. So, well, I appreciate you being with us. I think it's about time. It's about time. It's time for us to make some of these changes. You're making wonderful strides, University of Texas, Arlington, and we really appreciate you being with us today.
Absolutely. This is important work we all need to be taking on. It's not necessarily the funnest or easiest work, but important that we help our students cross the finish line.
President Cowley, thank you for helping us think differently about what it means to make higher education easier. You've made the case that reducing administrative burden isn't just about cutting red tape, it's about removing barriers that distract from learning, drain resources, and make it harder for students to succeed. Easier in this context means smarter, more student-centered, and more aligned with the realities of modern higher education.